Bit of spoilers here. But what if I was to tell you that Cozy Glow, who is the Season 8 finale villain, is not exactly what or who she seems to be? You might say, well, what do you mean? Or you might ask, well, what do you mean by that? And I'll explain why. You see, when I was rewatching the Season 8 finale, and I kept looking at all these different clues just scattered about, these different hints, I started to speculate that perhaps Cozy Glow is not exactly a real filly. Now you might say, well, is she Chrysalis in disguise? Here's the thing, if she was Chrysalis in disguise, she would have revealed herself to Starlight at the end of part 1. That's pretty much a confirmation there. But she didn't. Instead, it was just revealed that she is a young filly, adolescent filly, a child genius prodigy, if you will, that doesn't truly understand the concept of friendship. And that she looks at friendship as not being magical, but being about power. And when you look at all the clues that I'm about to point out that are scattered throughout the Season 8 finale, you will start kind of wondering the same thing. Heck, a lot of fans are pretty much doing that already. But what clues am I talking about? What clues am I talking about? Well, quite simple. One of the major clues, I think, has to deal with the fact that, like I said, has to deal with the fact of how she addressed Starlight at the end of part 1. She said something along the lines of, "You ponies," basically stating that maybe in the eyes of a lot of folks, as I said, perhaps stating in the eyes of a lot of folks, her addressing Starlight, and thus in a way addressing Twilight, Spike, and the rest of the main 6, on how they just didn't understand what they had in front of them, and the fact that they're using it for the wrong things and not what she feels is the right thing, and that's power, that's control, that's world domination, if you will. Now, some might take it that way. Some might say that's her way of addressing Starlight, Twilight, Spike, and the rest of the main 6, on how they're, in her mind, not utilizing the magic the way they should. Then again, some could speculate that it's her way, if she is from a certain time period, and I'll get to that in a moment. If she's from a certain time period, it might be her way of addressing the modern day ponies on how basically they just don't understand the real concept of the magic they have in front of them, and how they just don't understand how to really utilize it. That could be one theory, one speculation. Like I said, that could be one theory, one speculation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, to go with that speculation and that theory, what if I was to tell you that Cozy Glow could be from 1,000 years ago, or at least around Star Swirl's time, perhaps even when Star Swirl started to take ponies under his hoofs to teach them the ways of magic, to teach them because of the fact that they, like Celestia, Luna, and even Twilight, are filly, if not pony prodigies, or prodigies, whatever you want to call them, because of how knowledgeable and intelligent they are. What if I was to tell you that? You might think, well, how is that possible since she's a filly? she would be dead by now, right? Not unless she's an adult, I think I mentioned it earlier, she's an adult pegasus trapped in a filly's body. Hear me out on that. You see, she could have been taken under the wing or under the hooves of Swirl because of her being one of those prodigies. A pony, a filly that was more intelligent and smarter beyond her years. But besides that, also had a darkness to her. Yeah, that along with her being smart and intelligent and thus a prodigy, she also had a darkness to her. Like I said, she had a darkness to her. And what I mean by that is, my speculation in headcanon is she probably pulled a sunset shimmer on Swirl. Again, hear me out. The reason I say that is because of another clue that was given to us in part 1. You see, Swirl knew exactly what this spell was capable of. Basically what days certain magic would disappear, and basically when all of it would disappear within that span of those 3 days. He knew, like I said, he knew what days certain magic would disappear, and what, basically he knew the ins and outs about this spell. Like I said, he knew the ins and outs about this spell. So, that's another clue that made me speculate if maybe he knows who Cozy Glow is. And if Cozy Glow was once one of his first ever proteges. In other words, like I said, one of his very first students, that even despite her being this prodigy, this child, filly, adolescent pony genius, that she also had a darkness in her to the point that she pulled a sunset shimmer on him, just like Sunset did with Celestia, but unlike Sunset, showed no remorse. Why? Because of this theory and speculation. The theory and speculation is, like I said, she pulled a sunset shimmer, but without showing any remorse for what she had done later on, like Sunset did. And basically probably stole a spell out of one of the books that Swirl had, and it was a spell for de-aging. Yeah, you heard me right. De-aging. Now, how does this play into my speculation and theory? Real simple. Like I said, real simple. My speculation is Swirl saw a change coming over Cozy Glow. He started to see her true colors coming through. And then possibly, again, speculation and theory, possibly noticed her stealing one of his spells and running off with it. And then when he finally confronted her, perhaps with the other pillars, that's when she tried to unleash the spell on them, but Swirl was able to put up at the last moment some kind of magical shield that deflected the spell back at Cozy Glow, and thus caused her to have her own deeds be her undoing, and thus turn her into the filly, we have seen here in Season 8. Now, again, you might feel that that's a little convoluted, a little confusing, but when you think about it, all the clues that I mentioned, from basically Swirl knowing exactly, what the spell was going to do in the span of 3 days. The fact that Cozy Glow knew exactly what specific questions to ask Turok on how to drain magic and what kind of spell and artifacts and stuff were needed. How she was able, even on the spur of the moment, able to come up with a contingency plan to get Starlight and Naysay out of the way, and even was able, in the climax, be able to turn the student body temporarily against the young six, the student six. I mean, you take a look at all those clues, alright? You take a look at all those clues, and even the fact that it took Turok having words turned against him by Twilight to realize, oh, wait a minute, she asked me all these questions, but she never specifically stated that the end result was I'd still be remaining here in Tartarus, but I'd be stuck along with this Twilight and her friends, who would probably just annoy the heck out of me, and thus my revenge would be null and void. So again, you take a look at all those clues on how she was able to, how she even was able to bring this all together. And then, like I said, when certain things had to be altered, she was able to come up with a plan right on the fly. And then the biggest clue, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I believe, is how she addressed Starlight by saying, "you ponies." Now, some people may interpret that by saying she was addressing Starlight, Twilight, Spike, and the main six, and basically stating that they had no idea what they had in front of them, and that they weren't utilizing it the way it should be utilized in her eyes. Or, as I just pointed out, she could be addressing them as ponies of a modern era that differ from the time and era she came from, and basically how these modern ponies didn't know exactly how to use the magic that they had gifted to them. Again, as is in her eyes, basically these ponies, these modern day ponies, have no real idea of how to truly utilize the magic they have to rule kingdoms, to rule the world. And then probably, like I said, probably the biggest clue is how she was able to cast it, and she's just a filly. She's just a Pegasus filly. And that's where my theory and speculation comes in, is of the fact that she has to be from 1,000 years ago, and that in reality she has to be an adult Pegasus trapped in a filly's body, just by the fact that, she was able to pull all this off. She knew how to basically cast a spell when she got the items that was needed. And the ways that sometimes she carried herself, the way she spoke. Where she would sometimes, when she would get angry, have those distortions in her face. It's just that something was there, in my opinion, that kind of showed that perhaps she's a lot more than just a filly, and that she's possibly an adult Pegasus trapped in a filly's body because of a spell she was planning on using to turn maybe Swirl and the other pillars into fillies, and anybody else that would oppose her into fillies, thus allowing her to conquer Equestria. Again, just mere speculation. I could be wrong about it. If they want to keep her this way, keep her as she is, that's fine. But the other biggest clue is at the end. Why did they send her to Tartarus? Unless Swirl let them in on something about her, and we're going to find that out possibly in Season 9, maybe even in the Season 9 premiere, which could be a follow-up to this. Like I said, could be a follow-up to this, maybe with a trial for her, and maybe it's during this trial in the Season 9 premiere that we see exactly who she really is. Maybe Swirl steps forward, activates some kind of reverse spell, and changes her back. Perhaps we find out then that she's actually, like I say, a Pegasus trapped in a filly's body because she tried to use a certain de-aging spell on Swirl and the pillars and other ponies that would oppose her from 1,000 years ago. Now, I know you're listening to this, and I'm about 15 minutes in. I do apologize. I know you're listening to this, and you're probably wondering, or probably saying to yourself, or pointing out that it kind of defeats the purpose of her being a modern-day villain if that's the case. And in a sense, it does defeat the purpose, but does it? You see, as a filly, she's a modern-day villain, but overall, she could be like a hybrid. A hybrid of, she's a modern-day filly, a modern-day villain as a filly, but she's also a villain, adult-wise, from 1,000 years ago. Perfect hybrid, in a sense. But yeah, my thought, my speculation, my theory is that when I say she may not be who or what she seems to be, it's because I believe, and I know this is going on almost 16 minutes, I do apologize, but my theory in canon is the fact that, well, not canon, but my theory and speculation is she's just an adult Pegasus from 1,000 years ago that was taken under Swirl's hoofs because of how much of a prodigy she was, only to basically in time turn her back on him to try to utilize power and magic and control for herself so she could take over Equestria. Possibly stole a spell that she was going to plan to use to turn Swirl, the Pillars, and any other ponies that stood against her back into fillies, only to have that spell backfire on her and thus basically shot back at her, courtesy of a magical shield that Swirl probably put up when she tried to cast it on Swirl and the Pillars, and thus, by having the spell retracted back at her, resulted in her being trapped in the filly body that we now see her in. Again, just mere speculation, and I could be wrong about, and again, like I said, mere speculation, and I could be wrong about the whole scenario. I could be. But if I'm not, and in some shape or form, we find out that that's exactly what happened, and this is exactly who Cozy Glow is, don't put it past the creative team to do that, because that would really create a lot of intrigue. It really would. So, anyway, that's just my speculation and theory as to basically why I believe Cozy Glow is not exactly what or who she seems to be, and why I believe she's actually an adult Pegasus trapped in a filly Pegasus body. But that's really all I have to say on it, folks. Let me know what you all think down below. Comment if you like. I know some of you may disagree with this, and that's fine. But let me know what your thoughts are on what I had to say. Hopefully you've taken your time in watching this. I do apologize for a lot of the abrupt pausing at times, because, you know, I'm doing this in public before I clock into work, and mainly when you're in public, well, you have a lot of cars driving by, and you never know when someone's going to shout out a window just to be a you-know-what. Or maybe the vehicle's just way too loud. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, let me know what you guys all think about my theory. Comment down below. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Give me your thoughts on my... Again, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on my speculation and theory about, you know, about Cozy Glow being not exactly who she seems to be or what she is. You know, let me know what you guys think down below about that, and I will talk to you later. I got to get into work now, clock in, and perhaps see if I go home early or not. Peace out, God bless, but again, let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to y'all later.